My name is Michael Levan. I'll go ahead, I'll show a little bit of a demo, and then if we have some time, I know Ben wanted to show a little bit more of a advanced level demo. So one of the things that Mark, Ben, myself, we were talking about back in May, we started talking about this was uh, where Kodiak fits into everything. And for myself, I've been on both sides of the spectrum. I have done everything from being on the Kubernetes release team twice to contributing to open source solutions, to consulting for enterprises all over the place, working with tons of different vendors. And a couple of the things that I wasn't too privy about, and I'm still kind of not. So the first thing is I need an easy way to deploy. I don't want to continuously have to write, my upteenth YAML configuration or my upteenth IAC configuration. Ideally, I write it once, it's there, but that's usually never the case. You're usually going in, you're updating things, etc. The next thing was coming from the sysadmin background that I come from, because I started in systems administration in the middle of my career, so I moved to software development, and then now I'm in the middle, I guess you could say. I don't really want to manage infrastructure. I personally believe that infrastructure, whether it's a Kubernetes cluster, whether it's a VM, whatever it is, should be just as ephemeral and disposable as a container. I should just be able to bring up a configuration easy wherever I need to be able to run it. And that's kind of where I landed with working on Kodiak. So maybe three things that I'll show. So I'll show an easy configuration between clusters, by the way. So if I have multiple clusters running, if I have one cluster running, it doesn't matter. I don't really have to think about the underlying infrastructure. Yeah, it needs to get created. Yeah, it needs to get deployed. Yeah, there needs to be some day two stuff there, monitoring, observability, security, all that fun stuff. But do I personally need to care about getting it deployed, writing the configuration, the creation process? No, I really don't want to care about that. So one of the things that I'll show is when you drag and drop a deployment. So you have this thing called an asset here, and you could call it a container image if you want. Asset, I guess, sounds the best. So asset, it could be a container image, whatever it is. You have all of your assets here, and then you simply drag and drop. So what does that look like? Well, if I take this little hamburger icon here, and I'm gonna put it over here, drag and drop, click the confirm button, and now my application is being deployed. This is a container image. This is a Go web app that I built, containerized, stuck up in Docker Hub. So this is deployed, pod count is here, and that's it. That's all I had to do to get my application up and running. I didn't have to do any Kubernetes manifest stuff. I didn't have to decide whether it was going to be a deployment spec or a stateful set or a daemon set. I can manage that and handle that all in here as well. Pretty much what I care about is I got my application up and running. Now the next thing is, well, my application's up and running, but there's one thing here that I'm looking at. I have a pod count of 4. That might not always be the case, right? I might want to not use that application. I might want to deploy 2 replicas in one environment. I may want to deploy 4 replicas in another environment. Maybe in production, I want to do 5 or 6, whatever your workflow kind of looks like. And this is for local, this is for cloud, whatever your configuration looks like. But for me to do that, I have 2 choices. I can either A, have 3 different Kubernetes manifests where maybe I change one parameter, I change replicas to 2 to 4 or 5 or whatever as I'm deploying, or I have double the YAML where I'm using something like Helm, I'm using something like Customize, and I have to still manage all that stuff. Well, instead of that, come in here and I can either change my configurations. This is the dynamic config thing that Mark and Ben were talking about. I can either change my configurations for all of it. I can change it per environment. So I think I deployed in dev 1, or I can change it per cabinet, just like you can see here. By the way, a cabinet, you can think about it like, I like to think about it like a Linux namespace, but you can think about it like a Kubernetes namespace or a mini environment. I like when Ben says that, it sounds good. So mini environment sounds good. So you can manage it and deploy it via the mini environments, via your actual environment. So that's your dev, your UAT, your prod, your staging, whatever. Or you just have it all based on the primary configuration. So that main configuration, that's like the default. So if you're thinking about it from a diff perspective, this is going to be the default, and then you can change it based on environment. So if I do that, and I think I put it in dev1, so I'm going to come here, I'm going to go to footprint, I'm going to choose replicas. I can also do resource optimization here with CPU and memory at that level, just like you could in a Kubernetes manifest. And then maybe I'll change it to 2, and then I'll click save. Now, one of the things you might be thinking is, well, now this thing is deployed. It's not, and it shouldn't be. You shouldn't just do a configuration and poof, something goes into production or dev or UAT or whatever. So I have a couple of different options. I can either go back to main and I can just drag and drop the asset again, and it'll do a redeployment, or I can do it via the CLI, command line interface. I've learned recently that I'm the only one that calls it a CLI. So when I say that, I mean command line interface. So what I can do is I can do Kodiak asset deploy. Is that big enough? Yeah, it's big enough. Okay. And then from here, I choose which asset. And by the way, this is something that I want to point out. I like being on the command line, or I like being in an SDK as much as possible. I'm not a GUI person. I like to do everything programmatically as much as possible. But one of the things that I always have to ask myself is, like, let's say I want to build a wrapper around whatever SDK and whatever language I like. So I usually write in Go or TypeScript now. So if I'm doing that, I got to think to myself, does this actually make sense for me to do, or can I just have an easy prompt-based solution to get my application deployed? And that's why I typically go with a CLI. And in this case, again, I have that prompt-based solution. So when I do that, I choose which image. In this case, it's going to be the Go Web API. Right now, I only have one version, latest. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to run that. Then I have the ability to choose where I want to deploy. And this is important for one of two reasons. Number one, I don't have to guess. I don't have to fat finger anything if I'm typing it into a YAML configuration. Number two, notice here how it says latest. This means this application is already deployed in these cabinets. All right, so that helps me out a ton, knowing what versions are where, knowing what applications are where, knowing where my application stacks are. So dev1, notice, dev1, go deploy, right? It says latest. I'll go ahead, I'll redeploy. Fingers crossed. So at this point, it's doing the deployment. It's going to the particular cabinet. Now it's giving me the success. So if I come back here, may have to refresh, might not have to. Where is it? All right, so I didn't even have to do anything. It brought it down to 2 replicas. And that's it. So no YAML, no worrying about cluster management, no worrying about various other tools. But you can bring in other tools if you want to here. These two guys know that even though we're talking about Kodiak stuff, I'm always sending them different tools and different open source projects, and hey, check this out, check this out. So you could always use different things as well, right? But if you want easier deployment, you want easier management of your applications, and one of my favorite features, the central configuration, it makes things easier for me. Because again, I lived in the world of Customize and Helm for that particular piece, not the package management piece, for a long time. This is definitely going to make my life a little bit easier. And then one other thing I'll show, because I got 8 minutes, is the snapshot piece. So Mark was talking about this a little bit, and Ben as well. Now I have this configuration, right? So I made this configuration in this Go app, but let's say I have a couple of different other apps. So in this snapshot, I have 2 applications, my Go Web API and Nginx. These don't have anything to do with each other. They're just in the same place. So they have configurations tied to them, replica count, maybe they have annotations tied to them, whatever it is, based on environment. What if I have this application running somewhere and I have to do a blue-green deployment, or maybe I want to do a canary, right, where half my users are hitting this cabinet, the other half of my users are hitting this cabinet, right, based on old version, new version of the application. Well, what do I have to do? I have to create a bunch of configurations to do that, right? Whether I'm doing it in a Kubernetes manifest or I'm doing it another way. Well, with this, I go to the snapshot, I drag and drop to a cabinet, I can see my 2 versions here, I click confirm. So your snapshots are kind of like what snapshots are, right? They're in-memory copies of your application stack or your cluster if you're doing like VMware or VM-based snapshots. But in this case, it's a snapshot of what my environment looked like, what my cabinet looked like, and I'm able to go and deploy it with the exact same configurations. So this makes overall deployments easier, but it also makes the ability to take my application stacks, put them wherever I want in a simple way. I can also do that same thing via the client.
So just for clarification of
Sure.
my dictionary of words,
Yeah.
a cabinet is an environment, and that environment can be a cloud or an on-prem environment or anything, any mix, correct?
For somebody that's technical asking yourself, I would say think about it like a Linux namespace.
Okay.
For somebody that's higher level, I would say think about it like a mini environment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you were talking about, if you're wanting to do a blue-green or a canary deployment, can you do that between cabinets or so?
I can also do it between clusters.
Between clusters as well.
Yeah, because the clusters, the idea of a cluster is I don't want to care about my cluster. I don't want to care about my infrastructure. I know it needs to be there. I know it needs to be deployed. I know it needs to be maintained. I know I need monitoring, observability, whatever. But I personally do not have to worry about it. So in this case, for example, notice how in this 2-cluster environment, I have Levan testnet and I have second cluster. I'm dragging and dropping my applications. Right. They're all pulling the same configuration. So literally my underlying infrastructure pretty much no longer matters, to me at least, as I'm deploying.
So I know that this isn't your use case that you're targeting, but this could also be leveraged very easily for migrations as well.
100%. Should be.
You mean database migrations?
That too? Yeah. Yeah. Cluster migrations, database migrations.
Yeah, we call that cluster hopping, right? So, treating clusters like pets instead of cattle. It's a big topic, right? Everybody says, I will just upgrade in place, which is really risky, right? So what happens? How do you roll back a cluster? You can't. So everybody really needs to wants to be able to say, I need to upgrade these clusters safely. And we're saying, well, do a hop, jump from cluster to cluster, leave that old one behind for, sunset it, DR it, use it as a fallback. But we're sort of that elevated state for you. So the state of your cluster in A can move to the state. We can move that state to cluster B, literally, through a drag and drop. Doesn't matter how many microservices. Yeah, sorry. And so that's, jumping blue-green, canarying from cluster to cluster. We have a more sophisticated demo to show that. But yeah.
Can I ask a question or two? Thanks. So it's kind of click ops for my Kubernetes manifest is the way that I'm seeing it. Is that a fair statement or simplify too much?
I don't know what click ops means.
Sure.
So I would say yes, it's manifest is a part of it. So we're doing manifest, we're doing configuration,
Sure.
We're doing ingressing, we're doing infrastructure. We're sort of doing all.
But so just from a technical perspective, underneath the hood, the target is always going to be Kubernetes, correct? For the most part?
100%.
At the
right now.
Right. Great. So you brought those assets in to your the Kodiak interface.
Yep.
What do I need to do as an engineer to bring that in there? Is it just give you a Docker file? Do I give you?
Yeah, you give us here.
Yeah, I'll take that. We start off with you've got a Docker file,
Sure.
and you have a
so containers are the prerequisite.
Yeah, we're basically saying what's that? Yeah, of course. Yeah, you come equipped with a container and tell us about it. Tell it where it lives. Tell us where it lives. Tell us what you want to name it, and then you get to equip it. Both Mike was showing you configs. You can put probes on and all the et cetera, the HPAs, all that stuff. You can say this particular service, or we call it an asset, has these different pieces of equipment that it travels with.
So that totally makes sense. So I think I saw Nginx up there. So do I bring my own ingress? Do you guys handle ingress for me?
We do it. Yeah, we do it for you. You can bring your own if you want. We have customers doing both. We love to do it for you because, like I said, I was talking about that closed loop.
Yeah.
Obviously, the ingress is a big part of that, and we do it with a strategy. You'll basically say, "Hey, I've got this domain, and I want a I want it applied to this environment, and I want it to be a public or private domain, and I want my naming convention to look like service.environment.whatever my domain is, like api.dev.yourdomain.com.
Sure.
We will do all that for you if you tell us about that.
Right. And then I guess my last big question is there an on-prem offering of this, or is this
At the moment, we're EKS, AKS, but we're looking into all of that because we've abstracted the IAC.
So I'd bring my IAM credentials, for example, and then you would connect. Do you guys bootstrap clusters for me, or do I bring my own cluster?
Both. We can capture a cluster for you that's in place, or you can start a new one with us.
Okay. And that's EKS and AKS right now.
That's correct.
Okay. But the actual Kodiak platform, can that run inside my infrastructure yet, or do you guys don't have like an on-prem offering?
No, the Kodiak brain lives remote.
Yes.
The workhorse lives on your laptop, and there's another service, an agent that we put in the cluster for you.
What is the workhorse? I'm sorry.
It does all the work basically. So when you say deploy, we'll need to reference.
Yeah. So this is on-prem-ish, right? So where the CLI comes coupled up with a running container, right? So anytime you run the CLI, we kick on this container that runs on your laptop or inside of CI/CD.
You could kind of call that on-prem then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Ish.
So there's state management that we do to, sort of do our thing that lives on our cloud.